All right, so I did start recording. So my name is J.R. Logan. I'm the executive director at MakeHaven, and MakeHaven is one of the organizations in town who has been engaged at trying to help problem solve. And we've been doing that in collaboration with other organizations, the university, as many folks as we can coordinate with the theory that our collective energies can move things forward. There are a lot of messages moving around. There's a lot of ideas. There's a lot of different concepts for what can be 3D printed and so on. And so hopefully this gathering can help to separate some of the signal and noise so that we're all working with our best information. This call in particular, we have a number of partners from our surrounding communities who are launching or engaged in with their own efforts to respond to COVID. And so we're going to end with talking to some of those folks. And I'm going to mute, there we go, some of those folks who can elaborate, and perhaps we can exchange best practices and learn from each other. This is sort of, we found that there's scarce resources in some areas, elastic bands, other things, and together we can brainstorm and get creative. So I'm gonna go into the agenda, which is shared there. Lior, do you want to just give a quick update on what's happened with with MakeHaven so far and some of the projects? Just overview.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you everyone for coming. This is exciting to have so many interested people here. So I'm just going to run down the list quickly and let the presenters do obviously the bulk of the presenting, but just give a high-level update. The mask operation in terms of making reusable cotton-based masks is totally taken off, which is really exciting, both in a distributed and semi-centralized form. Face shields, we are just making over 1,000 face shields now, which we will be delivering in about an hour to Lisa Lattanza at Yale New Haven. The test swab applicator project has taken some turns. Colin Bunting has gotten really involved, which is pretty exciting. His background in 3D modeling and engineering has been pretty critical, and I'm excited to hear updates there. Rich has some ideas about how to modify a CPAP to be a good bridge option for individuals who are experiencing respiratory distress. There are a whole bunch of ventilator ideas popping up. MakeHaven's trying to put a group together to focus on developing ventilators for down the road. There are a lot of ideas around the world, so we're just trying to synthesize those and trying to figure out what the best ones are and that could be easily made and replicated. It looks like Bruce is talking about a splitter, which is based on the idea that multiple people could be hooked up to a single ventilator, as well as Stephen Robinson's DIY ventilator that he's been working on. I have an idea that I came up with over the weekend that I'm excited to talk briefly about. And then one other that didn't quite make it on here because it hasn't gotten much attention recently is just disinfection of N95s. A new article came out of Stanford about using heat instead of UV, and that looks pretty promising, so that may be picked back up. But the UV was kind of losing traction, so that hasn't really been picked up by anyone. So
Okay.
I think that's a high level for me.
Well, thank you, Lior, for that introductory status. So I think what we'll do is we'll jump over to the folks who are representing institutions and can give us a little bit of context so that we understand what we are, what we're working toward and what needs we're meeting. I saw Kathleen was on the call from the city of New Haven. Is there somebody else from the city of New Haven or just Kathleen? Well, you either are on mute or...
Hi, I'm off mute.
Yeah.
Okay. Camera is reversed and I have no idea why.
All right. Well, do you mind Hello, we can hear you. The camera's just aiming at a chair, but that's fine.
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know why it's not the front camera, but sorry about that. So firstly, it's amazing the work that you've done. We've been following it, and I believe our PR person is trying to get a story out there. So, or you may have even been contacted already, JR.
We're happy to talk to whoever. So
Okay.
yeah, so just from the city's perspective, if there's the needs for the masks and those sorts of things, if there's any new information that we should be like aware of as far as like needs that are emerging or should be prioritized.
I don't have new information about that yet. I asked about it. I was curious about linens for the cots that are going to go into some of the ancillary spaces, but I didn't get an answer back on that. But I don't know if anyone from the hospital is on that maybe would be able to answer that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess we'll jump over to Lisa then at the hospital. Lisa, do you any changes or reprioritization or problems that might be appropriate to distributed DIYers that have come to light since we last talked?
Let's see. One of the things that's been mentioned is just the importance of not using any latex in anything that's going to be worn by someone. Hospitals have tried to be latex free in the last 12 months to 2 years, just because there's a high incidence of latex allergy. So that would be one thing that maybe hasn't been talked about before. I think people have reached out with regard to, the types of masks that people should be making and how important the metal piece is. The metal piece on the nose bridge is really important. So if at all possible, that should be incorporated into the face mask design, along with making sure there's a pocket. I know I heard you guys say that elastic is getting hard to come by, especially for face mask. Having some kind of loop over the ears rather than having to tie it is preferable, just because of contamination. It's easier to take off. So these are some of the things that have been, discussed and are coming up as we're getting more of these, more people trying to help, and more different versions of things coming in from lots of different places. I can't think of anything else.
Sure, and I'm anticipating that you guys are getting a lot of requests for help. And is there a particular way? Would you prefer that people are working through other groups, or they contact you directly, follow some information? Is there anything you want people to know about how best to help and not add to confusion?
Yeah. Yeah, the email thing is getting pretty chaotic, and I'm sort of triaging the email. So I'm happy to have people reach out to me, and I can get it to the appropriate person if I'm not the appropriate person. I think, lots of people are sending in a ton of different ideas at this point, most of which have already been, they're coming from somewhere on the internet. So a lot of those at this point have already been sent to us, but I wouldn't discourage people, because it's really easy for me to send an email back just saying, tried that, or that kind of thing. I think the other thing that has come up is just when you guys have stuff, where to donate it, like physically where to take it. And somebody's going to be dropping stuff off to my assistant later today at my office. I think, although Yale New Haven Hospital is accepting donations, there's so much going in there. I'm afraid with these smaller lots of things, I worry about them getting sort of lost in the shuffle, which is why we made why we are doing this way today with the drop off. So if that doesn't work for you guys, or you have a better idea, let me know. Until my office is full, I think we can do it this way.
If I can just jump in real quick. So I am coordinating a lot of the sewing efforts for MakeHaven. This is Kate, the operations manager at MakeHaven. We do have on our website linked through the main document that's on the chat, and you can also get to it at makehaven.org/face-masks. We've used that as a central location that has the Yale approved pattern. We're working on making a video that goes through, because the pattern is a little more complicated for the Yale specific pattern. So we're going to be adding that. It has all of our drop-off locations as well as Yale's drop-off location from their page and their hours. So all of that is centralized there. The other thing I want to mention about those drop-off locations is that we are now using them as well as material stocks. Right now, I have little bundles of elastic that I'm going to be delivering. We've gotten some elastic from Eli Whitney and some other people who are just donating. And so you can find that information, those locations around the city where you can drop off if you have elastic, the metal pieces or the pipe cleaners, as you mentioned, for the nose bridge. So all that information is on the site, and people can pick up materials they need, drop off completed masks, or donate materials through there.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful.
And Lisa, I wondered if you have any insight, and you may not, about when more traditional suppliers of these sorts of things are expected, and because it kind of helps us to anticipate how much additional cheerleading and ramping up of the volunteer effort we should be engaging in.
Okay. So that's the million-dollar question. We've got a lot of orders out there, and there's kind of three problems. One is there are orders out there that we have no idea if they're coming or when they're coming because of multiple things. Some things are getting stopped coming out of China. Some things are getting confiscated by FEMA on the docks in New York. And so for those reasons, it's hard to predict. We definitely do have orders out there, and some has actually come in today. But we also don't know how long, as we get more and more patients, how long these supplies are going to last. So I would say maybe by the end of this week, I would have a better idea of where we are, because our supply chain people are trying really hard to come up with what is our actual need from a week-to-week basis and what do we have coming in. So I'm hoping maybe by Thursday or Friday that I could probably answer that question a little bit better than I'm answering it right now.
Great. Well, thank you for all those updates. And unless you have anything else to add to that, I'm going to jump over to Jamie Scott if he is on the call.
Okay, and I'm going to hop off now for another call, but reach out anytime.
Great. Well, thank you for jumping in and sharing the update.
Thank you.
All right.
Hi, JR and MakeHaven, Jameson Scott, New Haven Manufacturers Association. I could just provide some quick updates. You've heard about what some of the larger manufacturers are doing, like Modern Plastics, which is making the face shield, Biomed, where the governor was at yesterday. We're working with Colin Cooper, the chief manufacturing officer for the state of Connecticut, sort of triaging what the needs are out there. But I think most relevant to what I've heard to this group is I just got an email from a company called Rome Fast, or Rome Fasteners in Milford, and they're doing they've retooled to make nose crimps. They have fasteners, rivets. So if those sort of supplies are needed, they're available locally in Milford with American-made parts and supplies. So I don't know if stuff like that would be helpful or not, but we do have that sort of stuff available. As well as somebody mentioned UV earlier, and that it was not as popular, or maybe not as helpful, but there is a company also in Orange that makes UV lighting, where the lighting is cost effective, but the equipment that it's going on is what's really pricey. This is the lighting that will be put on equipment that goes into lab space or into operating rooms to totally purify and cleanse using UV light, and those lights are made in Orange, Connecticut. So we do have availability for supplies along those lines. So if anybody's interested, let JR know and he can get in touch with me.
Great, thank you. And I know that local manufacturing can be one of those stopgaps or bulwarks against those supply needs. And although there's some retooling, of course, that needs to happen, I'm sure that there'll be valuable things coming into play. So thank you, Scott, for that update. So I'm going to jump, those are the sort of institutional updates, and I want to jump into the community solution updates. So I'm going to go to Kate, who you saw a little bit of already, and she can give us the status and what's going on with the community mask making work.
Yeah, thanks, JR. So yeah, I think I got the key points out there right now is just that we're trying to coordinate people all around Greater New Haven to sew masks. Some people are using a more basic pattern that can be used for our soup kitchen, shelters, hospice workers, things like that. And then there is also a more advanced level, I would say, pattern for Yale New Haven Hospital, which is a pocket design where you can insert a surgical mask. And we're just trying to facilitate and connect people with that. We have drop boxes we have literal boxes on porches where people can leave their completed masks, and also where people can pick up materials if they're having a difficulty finding materials. We're also having a couple calls a week where people can check in, share tips and tricks about sewing, encourage each other, and also just sort of get the latest on any troubleshooting and things like that. So all of that information is at the MakeHaven face masks page, so you can find out more there. We have received probably about, I think we've delivered about 150 through the United Way. We also have a little over 100 that have gone directly to the hospital, plus several hundred in the works, but we also have several hundred requests that are still, people are still waiting. So we're definitely still trying to get more people who sew to get on board and join us.
Great. Thank you for that update, Kate. And I know that you have shared some links for people in here in the chat to those resources if they want to get involved and help out. I have either Joel or Aaron, somebody who's been working on the plastic face shields. Do you want to jump in and, yeah, Joel.
Yeah, so the face shield project has gone full force. I would say that we found a design that is relatively simple to manufacture without 3D printing, which there's a lot of designs that involve 3D printing, which unfortunately is pretty slow. But so we have a good design. The major challenge has just been getting raw materials. So getting any kind of thin plastic to make a face shield right now is extraordinarily challenging. And as you guys have heard, getting elastic has been quite challenging, and all of this is actually expensive, and so finding sources of money to physically just place the orders has also been challenging. But despite all of that, the team has produced now about 1,000 face shields in short order, and I just received an hour ago elastic to make another 2,300 face shields, although we will need foam and plastic. But we're cranking them out, and we're trying to get them to people that need them.
Yeah, I would just like to add that a 6-person team, just 2 people per station, it's incredibly effective, and we really are churning them out. Now, to add on to what Joel said, as far as this assembly approach, not using 3D printing, Colin Bunting's made it. He's informed me that Sikorsky is using their 3D printing to produce 30 face shields a day, and so we're a lot more productive than Sikorsky in this effort. Just really simple assembly line, and 6 people a day really makes a difference.
All right. Thanks for the update, folks. Let's jump over to the test swab applicator. We actually, I don't know if we might have Colin and we might have Cheney, who've both been working on that.
Sure. I don't know if Colin is here, but we've gone through, oh, he is. Hi. We've gone through a few different iterations since first coming up with this, sort of coming to you guys with this issue last week.
Can you just describe the issue a little bit? Yeah.
Oh,
just
yeah.
For people who are new to it. Yeah.
NP swabs are currently the only sort of effective way of sort of validated way of collecting samples to test for coronavirus. And the hospital and our research group is running very, very short on those. So they're basically like very long sticks with some nylon or rayon wrapped on the end. This is sort of a commercial product that you stick way up in somebody's nose, and the idea is that we can 3D print them. We kind of brought this up last week. We've gone through a few different iterations. Right now, our supply, it's a little bit less pressing because we have another potential supply that should get us through maybe a week or two, which is great. They're from a new supplier, so we need to test them, make sure that they're still compatible with our diagnostics test. But that takes a little bit of the pressure off. And a lot of our issues are with finalizing the design, which I think Colin can speak a little bit more about, and then figuring out how we're going to test it and get through the regulatory process with it. So Colin, if you want to talk more about the design that we're on.
Sure. So a lot of my role has been really catching up with the rest of the research community on what kind of research has been done, which there's been a lot. So it's been a lot of absorbing the large community of researchers who are working on this 3D printed swab problem. University of Washington is a big contributor that we've been working directly with, and they've been working directly in hand with HP and a couple of other providers that can 3D print designs. So they've actually taken them and done a little bit of testing to look at how effective each of those swabs is. I'm kind of involved just as far as what printers we have are going to kind of dictate what types of swab designs are going to be most effective for that printer. So I've got a few designs that I've just been kicking around from, ranging from bristles that are 40 microns thick all the way up to like an SLS printer, which has a minimum thickness of 0.8 millimeters. So depending on the printer that we use, we're scaling the design to fit the printer. The other side of it is I've been kind of getting in touch with people that I know around Connecticut. Interpro is a company that I'm working with right now. They're the local sales rep for HP that I've worked with through Sikorsky, but they're really gung-ho about trying to help out in whatever way they can for the swab problem. So they've pretty much opened their doors to us in terms of resources and said, hey, we'll do whatever we can. Just let's get the conversation going. So I've talked to them, and I'm kind of relaying to them what the regulatory obstacles would be, and if we could possibly solve it for them, because they've already kind of done 3D printing for other medical applications. So they have a little bit of experience, but they just need a little bit of guidance. So we're kind of working that side as well.
Great. Thank you, both of you. Does that sort of gives us an update from you guys? I'll move on to the next, unless you have something there. So the next one I have on the list was a concept that's been presented a couple times about enhanced CPAP. And I know that Rich did some research and was going to just report what he has learned about the feasibility of using CPAP machines. Rich, you there? We're not hearing you.
How about now?
Like you're a million miles away.
Any better?
Yes, better.
Okay.
But
all right. On the MakeHaven.
Please speak up more, though.
Surprised that I have to speak up more at this point. Can you turn your volume up? Because this was working great yesterday. I haven't changed anything.
Okay, well, just be loud.
Okay, I'll be loud. Speak up. All right, so on the MakeHaven Slack channel for COVID-19, I posted a few more pictures concerning making an adapter to go on the CPAP machine that will add more oxygen to the person who's connected to it. So when we first talked about this, the CPAP machine had not been, excuse me, please go away. The CPAP machine had not been approved for use for people who were having breathing problems, but it since has been approved by the FDA and WHO. So this is a step just before the respirator, and it can really help a lot of people. The CPAP really helps you breathe. So, but the Italians have had, I found an article, got some pictures, and you can see it there on the Slack channel of the adapter that was made in Italy that can be connected to the CPAP machine and have oxygen inserted so you can get better air because it has more O2 for the patient. Let me just show you right here what the issue is. Here is a CPAP machine and the mask. Brenda, please go away. Okay. I have nothing to present. Here is the input side. So this is where I would put the adapter and add the oxygen in here, and then everything happens fine out here. And the nice thing about it is there's no oxygen leak. That's the one that I designed or wrote about. There will be no oxygen leak into the room except when the person breathes. Now, here is the other machine, and this machine is probably one of the most prevalent machines that are out there right now. And this machine they're all over the place. Here is the input side. So the adapter would go into this slightly different hole, but once that adapter's there, the oxygen can be hooked in with a valve. And anyway, this would be the machines to make adapters for. These machines sell for $600 to $800 each. This is where the hose hooks up to the mask. So that is my conclusion. Also, I also found a site where some adapters are being sold already by the manufacturers of these machines to do exactly that. So for the medical people, the CPAP machine is a great step just prior to them. We're absolutely got to go to a respirator. And those people are in real trouble when they got to go to a respirator, but there's a lot of people who can benefit from this long before they get that far. So that's it. Any questions?
Great. Well, thanks, Rich. I think we'll save most questions to the end just so that we can get through all the presenters. But if you share those resources, I'll be sure to, I'll pull them from Slack and post them on our COVID page because you're really looking for someone else to continue investigation and figure out what they can do to take it further.
I have one more thing to add. NPR this afternoon had someone talking about how they're recycling these masks. You know what those are, the N95 or whatever they are. They have a technology that they disinfect contagious rooms in the hospitals, and they're finding out that technology will also recycle these masks so they can be reused again. Probably can go and find it on the NPR, National Public Radio's channel for the rebroadcasting, and hear how they've done it and how it's been tested and it works. So these masks can be reused if they're disinfected in the way that they do the infectious rooms. Okay, I'm pretty much done with that.
All right. Thank you.
If anyone wants to go forward with making the adapters and adding oxygen to the machine, please let me know.
Great. Thank you, Rich. We're going to jump over to Bruce, who has been working on a ventilator splitter. Bruce, are you there?
Yeah. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're much louder.
Okay. All right. I'll try not to yell. So I've been working for the week, maybe a week and a half or so, with this team through a platform called Helpful Engineering. So it's sort of a crowdsource design platform. They have about 35 projects, all related to COVID support. And basically it's a lot of discussion on Slack, and people are working from all over the world, outside of work hours or inside of work hours. So it's a very chaotic way of developing something. but it's also surprisingly effective because, you go to bed and someone else picks up, who might be halfway across the world. It's been a learning process for me. So I'm a mechanical engineer, not a biomedical engineer. I've been learning quite a bit. Ventilator is sort of a very critical component for someone who can't breathe. So it breathes for them. The people who are on ventilators are typically intubated. I think necessarily intubated and sedated, either completely sedated or partially sedated so they can trigger breaths, but the machine is providing all the pressure. So there's a big shortage of these ventilators, as we know, in the country and in the world. So this idea would be to split a ventilator so that the same machine can provide air for 2, 3, or even 4 patients. So most of these machines have a much higher airflow capacity than they use. So potentially up to 4 people, that may be a little optimistic. I think New York is allowing ideas for splitting them into 2. But even that, let's say you could double, a lot of the ventilator capacity. It's a very compelling, but maybe dangerous idea. So again, it's a very last resort, but unfortunately something that's being explored. So the design we're working on is all open source. So that means that everything is, all the models, CAD models and files, everything is put up onto GitHub. Anybody can access it. I wouldn't recommend just grabbing everything and making one until everything's done, but it's all there for someone to, say you have an idea to change, make something a little smaller or better working, you can just post it up there, and if it's a better idea, then it gets accepted. So really quickly, the idea of splitting a ventilator, you can't just make a little manifold that sprouts off from 1 to 2, 3, or 4 pathways. You get a risk of someone exhaling and then cross contamination. But the main thing is that every patient needs slightly different, say, amount of flow, or they may need different pressure. So the doctors carefully monitor all these parameters. So you really need independent control from each one. And also, the patient, this disease, the patient's lungs physically change throughout the process. So one day, you might have 2, 3, 4 patients on a ventilator, same condition. And then, in a few hours or a day or so, all of a sudden one is getting half as much air as the rest. So you really need a lot of control. So that's one of the main reasons this idea of splitting is not palatable. You lose control. So the idea of this project is to add check valves so that your exhalation doesn't go back up through the tubes, and to add flow control, flow sensors, and 3-way valves to bypass. So say you want to take one patient off, you just turn a bypass and take them off. So it gets complicated pretty quickly, but a lot of these things are existing components either in other devices or in the hospital. So the idea with this is that if global supply chains are interrupted, as they are, and you can't get your hands on a fitting or an adapter or a valve or something you need, a hospital or a nearby space could print up the part and supply it in a hurry. So all the hospitals would be in charge of fabricating and sanitizing and testing all the equipment. They may want to make their own modifications to it, but the idea is to quickly get an idea out there and a set of models that a facility could pretty easily print without any expert knowledge or any special tooling. So it's gotten pretty far. Most of the components have been designed and tested. They're kind of working on the flow control, which is coming along. So maybe in a week, 2 weeks, they'll have something we will have something that's ready for testing.
And so if people want to see more of the technical aspects, they would go to Helpful Engineering and go to their GitHub, it sounded like.
Yeah, so if you go sign up at helpfulengineering.org, I guess you could sign up as a volunteer and look for the COVID ventilator project. I can also post information, but the Slack channel is like rummaging through your grandmother's attic. It's hard to find information that's that's a good overview. So contact me if you're interested. I'll try to post a link before this thing is done.
Great. Well, thank you, Bruce, for that update. I think we will jump over to Stephen, if Stephen is on the line. I know that he presented last time about a DIY ventilator, which is a more complex project. And folks have been evaluating the various many projects that are out there in the community. Stephen, are you on the call?
Yes, I am. Hopefully you can hear me.
Great. Have you what have you discovered in your research since the last week?
Well, it's definitely an evolving space. The Helpful Engineering Slack channel, I've been on that for a couple of weeks now, and rummaging around in some basement full of ideas that are fusing together is an understatement. There's so many things going on there, it's hard to really synthesize what the different projects are. And I think with the DIY ventilator, I created a design and put it out there, and it is one of a whole set of designs that are being evaluated at present. There's a list, I think I posted it to our Slack channel, and that list seems to be growing daily. There's probably about 20 different designs on there. And I think including also a link that was posted to a professional ventilator, which has been open sourced. So really the designs kind of fall into several categories. One is these ambulatory bags, which are basically would normally be manually manipulated, and effectively just creating a very simple device to squeeze those automatically. Then there's the types such as the one I created, which involve sort of more high pressure and regulating those high pressures and then putting that into a patient. And then there's this other category, which is professional grade ventilators with a full design, which has been open sourced. So if you look at the professional grade ventilator, which has been open sourced, that sounds great. But I've reviewed the documents, and to my understanding at the moment, it would be a giant project to replicate that thing. Unless you're GM and you've got a factory and a lot of engineers that can work on that. So I think part of the questions that from a ventilator perspective would be, where would any effort that we would push forward be best positioned? How could we be positioned to make a success there? Are we looking to try and develop a solution that could be cost effectively created by teams which have the tooling that, say, MakeHaven has? Or is it that we are trying to help push a bigger rock up a hill by helping GM push forward with taking that sort of open source tool forward? So I think, if we were to go forward with this under a MakeHaven umbrella, the question is, which of those different, there's a strategy question, and then there would be a which would we want to pursue, and then who can help do that. I've also been fielding inquiries from people that have reached out through just hearing the name of the project that I did and that it being associated with eStroke software, and so they've just gone to that website and then reached out to me. I put some links up there to point them to my project, the project that I started off with, but also a link to a sign-up page which JR set up. So it might be worth regrouping and saying who's actually responded, what is their interest in moving forward, and what particular design would make the most sense. And that may be an ambulatory bag approach, because it could be potentially a simpler design to work forward than necessarily a higher pressure. But that's sort of where the space is at the moment.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's no clear winner, and there's that constructability and then the applicability of the device so that it's useful for a COVID patient are these weighted things that you need to evaluate before we fully commit or decide to go for a project.
Yeah, and I think, one has to be realistic. It's what is the thing that we're working on? Where's it meant to slot in, right? So if, for example, GM is banging out thousands and thousands of ventilators that could support the full needs of the US as the epidemic grows, it makes less sense to be trying to produce a device in the US. Maybe it's better to be, maybe it's more sophisticated to say, we could help advance a design that could be used in countries where they don't have access to the same huge manufacturing base and tooling. So those are the kinds of things to think about rather than just saying, "Hey, we got something." Is it the wrong? Is it going to be useful?
Yeah, thank you. I think those are good thoughts, and we will answer those questions. Lior, you wanted to present on your germ vacuum?
Yep. So I just had this idea pretty recently, and I shouted out to a bunch of doctors, healthcare providers, and got really positive feedback. And just this morning sent out an email to a crew to get some ideas, and I'm pretty excited about it. So I just want to share the spirit of the idea, and then if anyone is interested in sharing their own thoughts, I'll leave my email in the chat so you can get in touch. So the gist of the idea is that our approach right now to dealing with the spread of germs is to clean surfaces that could possibly have been contaminated, and also to protect everyone else from those germs that are invisible but we fear in the air and could infect us. That requires an incredible amount of PPE, personal protective equipment, on healthcare providers in a contagion-infested area like a hospital. That's very expensive and material intense, and it's very easy to mess up. As soon as you don or doff your PPE incorrectly one time, you've potentially exposed yourself. And in my mind, a very direct parallel is in a wood shop where I happen to spend a bunch of time. If you have a tool and you just let it spray sawdust everywhere, you need to wear a mask. You need to be vacuuming every surface. If you really don't want to be exposed to the dust, you need to go to great extents to clean the air, and it's a really intensive process. So the alternative that people regularly use is by vacuuming up at the source. You don't wait for it to go everywhere. And this is exacerbated in a healthcare setting when the sawdust is invisible. So you need to be incredibly meticulous because you can't even see where it's piling up. So my thought was to make some kind of vacuum situation that would end in an inlet that would go near the patient's face, just to literally act as an extractor to pick up the germs that they give out. And then I sent this idea out, and Shannon Burke responded with something that exists, which I just have a lot of experience with, but it didn't occur to me that it was a direct parallel that we could use. I was going to try to hold it up to the camera and see if people can. Higher. Can you see that?
Yep.
Yep. Cool. So, I mean, this thing, it looks like it could be big. I thought it was until I looked at the dimensions, but it's about 1 foot by 1 foot by 17 inches tall. So it's very small. It has room for 2 of these hoses that come out. It ends in a really big sort of impedance coupled nozzle. So it could be put in just like within a foot of someone's face and get up all the germs. If it needed to be moved out of the way, it articulates. So you could just push it out of the way. You can put on it a clean room grade filter, which is an incredibly high performance filter that would take out every little thing it produced. This one happens to be really quiet, so it wouldn't be super annoying. And it comes out to like, maybe $1,300, $1,200, which in the scheme of things, where we are right now, is not very much money. Now, obviously, like this supply would get used up very quickly, but I think in my mind, it just makes so much sense that it's wild to me that we are dealing with germs the way we are. And this wouldn't change. We would still need to wear masks and PPE and whatnot. You still need to treat that threat as real. But I think that even if it caught 90% of the germs, that's still huge. That still just reduces the chance of someone getting exposed by a large degree. So one nice thing about this isn't the last line of defense. It's not like a mask that needs to perform really well. This just needs to do a decent job because we're still maintaining all of the other protective measures. This is just helping to ameliorate the situation a little bit. In my mind, it would go in the best case scenario next to any patient who is even suspected of being infected, and preferably even in the ambulance setting, just at any point where we can help contain. So that's the idea. Feel free to email me. I'm just going to post the message here. My next step is going to be talking to people working at Yale New Haven to see if this is something they'd be interested in buying. Like as it is, we wouldn't need to do anything, which is fantastic. They could just buy it and use it, which is really exciting to me. That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, and so I just before this call, I talked to Joe Zinter at the CID, the Yale Center for Engineering, Innovation, and Design. And I know that they're leading a number, they essentially have skunk works across Yale where they're doing a lot of work and particularly focusing on testing to be sure that things are effective. I think the initiative's called Chime, but we were talking, and as they identify things that have high effectiveness and are useful, we talked about how resources like MakeHaven and of course other labs could be made available to try and quickly implement that production in parallel. So that's another update. He was not able to join us, but wanted to share that the highlight of that conversation. So I just want to jump into now. We are joined by some of our neighbors who are doing similar initiatives. And so why don't you just jump in, tell us who you are and what you are doing in your area. And we can start with Mike from Danbury.
Hey, thanks, JR. I'll be really, really brief. We're about a week behind you. Our biggest challenge was finding the right person at the hospital to actually coordinate with. That was a really big deal for us. Once we got the right person, they opened up the floodgates. It looks like they've approved the Prusa design that we're running with. We're trying to do the laser design, but we're having issues with that. I'll get back to that. So basically, we've scrounged up $2,500 and bought a huge round of plastic. We bought 50 sheets of PETG plastic, about 1/40 of an inch, I believe. And so we're ramping up to be right behind you making masks, but our pattern is different. We're not using the foam. So we're having some issues, and I'll probably post something along the issues we're having. It's the advanced Prusa design. The tabs are breaking on the plastic. Could be the wrong size. One of our teams is actually making and selling the intubation chambers to hospitals. They provide the first two to Danbury on Saturday morning after hearing about it on Saturday morning. And Saturday afternoon, they delivered them. They've created, I think, a dozen of them. In hospitals all over the area have been buying them. Their cost is $200. Their company, they're selling them for $300. But we're trying to ramp up mass production. We have enough materials to make about 2,000 masks at this point. We think we've sourced the elastic as well. So that's been a really big challenge. But the point I wanted to make was, after this happens, we all need to have contacts at our local hospitals because we wasted a week trying to find the right person. So, by the way, I love this call. I'm sorry I popped in and out. I'm in a low reception area. I finally got settled. So that's it. In terms of fundraising, I just was picking up a check from a local oil company. The local businesses are literally open up the checkbooks. They can't figure out where to spend the money. So if you're looking for money, I made a call to a local patron, and he did $500, and then he tested positive, and he did $1,000 worth of money for the plastic. So reach out to the people in the area, the community banks. Put a post on Facebook. Our 3D printer post got 15,000 views. Put the word out. We put a donation page. We're starting to get money in from that. We're not taking any money from this. We're just trying to buy plastic and elastic. So that's my quick update. I love what you guys are doing. We're following what you're doing and hopefully learning from you. That's it.
Great. Thank you, Mike, from the Danbury Hackerspace. Is Drew or Devra there from Makerspace CT in Hartford? No? If you're on mute. All right. Is Vladimir there from Norwalk or Norwalk area?
Yeah, hey JR, I'm here.
Yeah, do you want to just tell us what you guys are doing or ramping up to do?
Yeah, so I mean, not much to tell, but we have we're actually just starting now. Just put a team together. So after this call, we have our own call that we're going to talk about what strategy we want to take. So yeah, I've just been listening, seeing what you guys are doing. A lot of really good information that I've been able to get. So really, we're just kind of right in the beginning stages of it right now to really come up with which way we can be the most helpful. So yeah, that's where we are.
Great. And so if you go to the MakeHaven COVID response page, there's a lot of the contacts and a lot of just the kind of high level learning that we have. And hopefully the folks that are leading various projects are willing to help you guys get started and move forward. So hopefully we can save you some time.
Yeah, great.
And New London, Spark Makerspace. Do we have someone from there?
Yeah, hey. Can you guys hear me?
Hey, you're coming in a little quiet, so be sure to
right,
speak up or closer to your mic.
This is probably a little better.
Yeah.
Crappy mic. So, how's it going, guys? So Spark's board met last week to discuss what to do about COVID-19, and at the time, we still hadn't had a solid contact with Lawrence and Memorial Hospital here in New London. But we had kind of peripheral contacts in that area. And at the time we came to the decision that it would be best to back off from any project that would put questionable PPE out there, because also at the time, the day was not reporting any shortage of that equipment at the hospital. I'll say since then, not a lot has changed in terms of our contacts with the hospital. We do have a board meeting this Wednesday to reevaluate the situation. And I do know that our sewing group has been moving ahead anyway with covers for N95 masks, but they're running low on elastic as well. And it sounds like that's a common problem. So that's, I guess, good to know. Good to be aware of at least. So hopefully this Wednesday we'll, pick up the ball and move it forward and start to actually get some useful stuff out there to people who need it.
Great. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that update. Is there anybody who I missed, either a regional effort or a special project that's happening?
Hi, my name is Cedric. I'm from Sacred Art University. I've met a couple of you. I'm brand new in the region, and we're trying to help. So basically, we're a university makerspace for now. We're not really open to the public, so we don't really have a community, and we're brand new. So basically, right now, it's 2 people trying to print. But we do have a lot of equipment, so and a large university to help. So where we are right now is I have about 100 masks next to me right now that we've been 3D printed. We're doing the RC3 model from Prusa, which I've seen a lot of you are doing too. We're working with St. Mary's Hospital, and there's a couple of things that we could help with or be helped with. We're doing a fundraising, and one of the first thing that came out is based on our alumni, there's a good chance that we're going to raise way more than what we can technically do with the 2 of us. So there's the question of maybe doing a shared effort with that. There's a second thing that's interesting is Gary McManara, well, I can't say his name, is the chief of police, and he's offering to transport them to hospitals and do basically some sort of transportation between the places of production and the places of usage to keep people as safe as they can, because their guys are on the run anyway. We are trying to secure plastic like everybody else, I guess. and we would like to help in that effort. We would like to be helped in that effort more than anything else. And that's pretty much it.
Great. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that update, and hopefully a collaboration with the funding and other projects can result. Was there anyone else?
One thing is we have two large lasers and a water jet if anybody wants to use them.
Water jet's good to know about too, yeah. Any other updates that I missed? If not, we can go into questions. So because we have a lot of people, I'm trying to moderate the questions as best we can. So I will look at the chat, and if we've exhausted those, we can jump into voice questions, which generally take longer. So if you have a question, please just drop it in the chat on the side, and I will read it off.
JR, can I just make a quick kind of announcement question to the audience? One of the things I've seen recently is in the ventilator side of projects, the do-it-yourself ventilator project, there is a open source design that's been made public by Medtronic. And basically you can go find those files and take a look at them. So what I'm kind of proposing is if you have any kind of specialized knowledge or medical knowledge or fabrication knowledge that you'd be willing to look into for the ventilator, feel free to go check that stuff out and kind of take a look at it. And you can either let me know or let someone know on Slack if it's something that appears feasible or if it's kind of out of our wheelhouse. I haven't had a chance to even look at the documentation, but it might be something good for like lots of people to take a look at and just see if we can pool together resources to make it happen.
I mean, I would make a comment on that if I might. I did have a look at those design files, and it's complex. It's physically a small box. And those are the design files you would need, I'm sure, to pass an FDA inspection. If you look at just even the electronics, it's a lot of boards and a lot of electronics. So I am suspicious that you would need significant team of engineers to be able to replicate, to take what that is and convert it into that design plus equipment and people equals numbers of these things being cranked out. My concern is the complexity of it would mean that it's something outside the realm of something that a makerspace could crank out.
Gotcha. Thanks for the feedback.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool. It's great design, but I mean, you've got like, you know, I had a look at it before, and thanks so much for the link. I think you put it out there. And I may be completely wrong, but this is sort of speaking with my sort of engineer kind of hat on. And I've done kind of embedded electronics and software development. I haven't really done so much of the hardware setup, but you know, there's like many, you know, the electrical schemas are probably about 5 PDFs, and each PDF has like 10 pages inside it with, you know, a lot of component stuff. And then, you know, the manufacturing stuff, there's a lot of components that would have to go together. If you gave me that as a reverse engineering project, and I had like a fabrication facility with like some hardware engineers, some software and some mechanical engineers, I'd say, oh yeah, well, we could probably tool up with this with enough, you know, time and equipment in the space of like 6 months.
Yeah. So one thing I'll mention is I want to experiment with something, which is to have these breakout sessions afterwards. So I created in the on the event, there's 3 links underneath breakout. There's one for protective equipment, which is more like low-tech stuff we're using now. There's medical equipment augmentation. I was thinking like splitters, maybe the CPAP machine, other things where you're not creating a whole system. And then there's system replacement, which is that highest level of MacGyvering where you're actually building something from scratch. And so my hope is that after these questions, you know, it's completely optional, that folks that are interested can jump into those breakouts and have a more intimate conversation than we can have with the 33 people that are, that are here now. So I present that as an option once we go. No guarantees how well it will work since it's completely experimental to do the breakouts. So yeah, we can do voice questions. Any other questions or comments from the group at large? Oh, we have something. Oh.
There were some in chat, by the way.
Yeah,
Ben had a question, and Dr. Czar.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start at Harvey. Yeah, so Anithia, hi, good to see you, Harvey. Speak to the ventilator problems and PPE. Did you want to do, well, I heard Shannon. So Shannon, do you want to speak first? What were you saying, Shannon?
Oh, I was just saying that there were comments in chat. And I also put my, I'm volunteering as a resource because I work at Medtronic. I've worked in medical device product development and quality specifically for about a decade. And so a lot of the kinds of like, what kind of stuff do we need to make sure that our electronics don't interfere with so that we don't accidentally like short circuit the, monitoring equipment or some of those kinds of things. I might be able to help. And especially a lot of the sourcing type stuff for like, splitters and valves and stuff that are already made of medical grade plastic. I'm a big fan of not reinventing the wheel when we can buy stuff off the shelf if we can.
Great, thank you. And Harvey, do you have audio? It sounds like you wanted to speak to some things here, and Ben is supporting that. If you have audio, go for it. Looks like we don't have Harvey. So I'm looking for other.
So if Harvey can get his audio through, I did want to say anything.
Yes, please go ahead, Ben.
So long story short, going to the question of what ventilator is the right solution, if any. One quick thing that I wanted to note is that my understanding is that a lot of the complexity of ventilators and many of the circuit boards, et cetera, comes from the fact that they have several different operating modes. But for patients that are specifically on ventilators for reasons of coronavirus, the treatment guideline is that most of them are on a single mode, and Harvey can back me up on this. I think that mode is called volume control, and from a functionality standpoint is the simplest of the modes that the ventilator has. So if we were trying to build something that is a ventilator that is potentially useful for coronavirus, not necessarily to fill the general need of ventilators, something that only has volume control mode would be useful and would dodge a lot of the operational, electronic, mechanical complexity of a full-on ventilator.
Well, let me talk about the ventilators in particular, because I've got like a lot of expertise in this. I'm an anesthesiologist. I've been ventilating patients for 42 years. I'm also an engineer. Let me start out with a couple things just real quick on PPE. One, if you can't get elastic and you're making hospital stuff, most of the masks that people are used to using in the hospital tie behind the head. So if you make a fabric type, that's going to be fine. People are used to doing that already. Second, a lot of the filter elements in N95 masks, melt-blown fabrics, you find them in sanitary pads and diapers. They can be repurposed. Also, HEPA filters actually provide filtering more than N95 masks. Actually, today, I adapted a gas mask to a HEPA filter I bought at Walmart. Do you see me on video?
We do.
Okay. Well, this is it. It's an old Russian gas mask that I bought a long time ago, and this is the HEPA filter. It works very well, actually. Now, getting into the ventilators. Actually, I've been looking at this for the last week, and there's some really both low-tech, intermediate tech, and higher tech solutions. And I can look at a lot of this stuff. If you have the files, I can kind of pick out what's important. we're in a situation where we don't have enough of what's needed. I was working in a hospital 2 weeks ago up in Massachusetts, and nobody had enough PPE. And the epidemic wasn't even that bad. This was in Holyoke, Massachusetts. What we need in ventilators, there's different kinds of ventilators. Actually, volume control is the most basic. It's the easiest method of ventilation for the physician, but it's not necessarily the easiest to build. I've looked at people that have been like hacking CPAP machines. There's one guy online that he was able to rotate between two pressures by hacking the CPAP machine. That's pressure control ventilation. It's relatively easy to do. It may help a lot of people, and there's a lot of CPAP machines out there. If we could get actually some help from the companies that make them, like Respironics, maybe easier to adapt them. Now, as far as another alternative that people really haven't talked about is high frequency jet ventilation. And this was very common in the Eastern Bloc, like the Soviet Union and Eastern European countries prior to the fall of communism. And the reason it was used is that one of the things they could do with it is they could run it off of pneumatic logic. So you had a bunch of valves and you hooked it up to a high pressure line and you didn't need any electronics. And it was cheap and reliable. And this is something you need to think about. If somebody here is like at Yale or some academic institution where they can get a 1977 paper that describes how to do it. I know the people who wrote the paper, and it's actually pretty easy to do and something you could like crank out real quick. There's a third option that is an ambu bag squeezer that was developed at Rice University for use in third world low resource countries. We're getting there fast. They make it with a plastic rack and pinion and gear. I think for more reliability, could cut it out of aluminum. And we could do it with machines that we have at MakeHaven. It's a relatively simple device. But again, when you're running out of ventilators, you know, it's a feasible option. So regardless, even if like all of a sudden, you know, Trump declares a miracle and like we have 100,000 ventilators, you know, these things can be used in third world countries. This is going around the globe and will probably circle around a couple times. Now, it's volume control. I'd have to take a look at it, but most of the volume control ventilators that I'm familiar with, you probably need more electronic.
Great. So we had a question. Shannon wanted to know from you, Harvey, specifically, if you can comment on high flow oxygen versus ventilator need. Oh. Looks like I lost Harvey. I don't know if other people did as well. So we won't have that. I think we have covered a lot of our bases here, and we've gone 10 minutes over the hour. I did want to keep it to an hour as much as possible. I see a whole bunch of chat in the sidebar, people making connections, which is exactly what we want. And we have the option of the breakouts. So again, on that, again, on that event page, you can go and, you know, jump into the level of involvement of the three that you want and see if you can have some conversation person to person and further deepen your connections. Harvey, we had lost you for a bit. I don't know if you had any just closing statement on Shannon's question about oxygen versus ventilation. High flow oxygen need versus ventilator need.
What is the question? Can I get the detail on the question?
Yeah, sure. I just, I'm not experienced with ventilators. I know I've heard a lot that the high flow oxygen, which is, I guess, a previous step generally in care for pneumonia patients before you need a vent, that is an easier piece of equipment possibly to helped develop. I don't know if there's a shortage of that equipment also, or if it's really just the vents.
You know, I don't know if there's a shortage either. Honestly, it's a good option. From my experience, I work part-time in a lot of hospitals. Most people don't use it. That doesn't mean that it's not effective. My impression is it's effective. It's just not used. And people in medicine, if they're not familiar with it, they just don't use it. That's part of the problem. You know, engineers like to think new and improved. Doctors like to think tried and true. They're not really good at new stuff, to be honest about it. I don't know if you can make it. I don't know what's involved in making it. And I think like one of the things we need to think about is 3D printing things is not necessarily the way to go on everything. But if you can, it's helpful because it can like buy time for a lot of people. You know, one of the things is we're resource limited. You know, if you can buy a couple of days till a ventilator becomes free, it's, you know, it's worth doing. CPAP may also work in that situation. Like they use BiPAP and CPAP masks. You know, and BiPAP is very similar to CPAP. It's just two levels of, you know, it's just two levels of CPAP basically. So reprogramming a CPAP machine actually may be an easier way to go because you can use old ones. Okay, if you ask people for donations, old CPAP machines, you could probably get a lot of CPAP machines.
Great. So I think we have some ideas. I think I have answered most of the ones that were questions, but I also saw a lot of suggestions and ideas, such as some shared resource lists and so on, which I think are good ideas. We will, I encourage people to go and try a breakout. Let's see if that works. If you have an area and you can want to have discussion with more folks. But I'm going to close this, this meeting. Thank you so much for an update. I think we may well do something similar again next week. We'll make that decision as the week goes through. Thanks everyone for being here.
Thanks. I'm just posting in the